3, 2, 1.
And good morning. Welcome to the April 23rd, 2020 preliminary comprehensive plan amendment and docketing process. And we'll start by way of introductions. I'm John Hutchings, the chair of the board. And let me see if I can go around the room here and get everybody correct. We have Commissioner Ty Menser, vice chair. We have Commissioner Gary Edwards, and he is sitting with County Manager Ramiro Chavez. And we have Assistant County Manager Robin Campbell. And let me see, we have, there's Josh Cummings, the CPED Director. And we have Jennifer Davis. What's your exact title, Jennifer?
Community Planning Manager.
You're right, you're the tech. And we have Maya Teeple. And Maya, you're a senior something.
Senior planner.
Planner, I knew it. Okay. And Brett Burris, and you're a manager of
Building and Planning Manager.
Got it, permitting, okay. And Travis Burns, our resident legal expert from the prosecuting attorney's office. So thank you all for joining us. Is there anybody on the phone, Ramiro?
Not yet.
Okay, so let's begin. I want to turn this over to perhaps Ramiro to orchestrate, make sure we have our paperwork all in order, because this kind of took us half an hour to do this last time.
Yeah. Thank you, commissioners. This is a follow-up to last week's meeting, April 15, 2020, where last week we made some preliminary decisions related to the comprehensive plan amendment docket. And that has already been through. Appreciate that decision. And also today is the next step in the process, which is the development code docket. And hopefully we have set up a meeting until 1 in the afternoon today to give you enough time to ask questions for staff to present that information before you make, hopefully, a decision what items you would like to include on the development code docket for 2021, 2022. It's 2020, 2021, sorry.
There you go.
Thank you. And also, I may ask you, Commissioner Hutchins, just leading to noon to have a little break for staff who's joined this meeting in the office to come and get a lunch box, since we're gonna be working through lunch today.
So thank you for saying that, because I want to add, for those watching at home, you're going to be riveted by this 3-hour meeting. But we will take a break at noon, just before noon, so we can fetch some nourishment. But also remember that if you're remoting in like most of us are, you can mute if you wish. But in the main boardroom, they can hear you crunching chips. So we just want to be sure that we're cognizant of that information.
Yes, sir, and I will try to mute the microphone here in the boardroom as well.
Important safety tip, thank you. All right, go ahead, Ramiro.
So at this point, I will turn it over to Josh, and he can kick it off.
Great. Thank you, Ramiro. Thank you, Chair Hutchings. Just wanted to say again, thank you to the Board of County Commissioners for the direction that was provided in the last briefing regarding the comprehensive plan amendments. That was great work and a heavy lift, and really appreciate the attention to detail and the questions that we received to flesh out these issues. Again, we're headed into the development code docket discussion today. And as I've said before, this is a big and full detailed package in honor of transparency, allowing for input from the community and allowing for questions from the Board of County Commissioners. And this is your time to provide any of those questions, any of that input, and for you, the Board of County Commissioners, to set the direction based on the input that's provided by the community. The staff is merely the conduit to facilitate the community's input. I just want to make sure that this continues to be recognized, that this is a transparent and consistent process as allows with our values within CPED and the county. And I want to thank very much Jennifer Davis and Brett Burris and the rest of the CPED team working really hard to provide you those one-pagers and to distill the information in a way that makes sense and we can go through relatively quickly. But as always, we're open to as much dialogue as you need to make the other decisions on the items that we'll be working on in CPED and the priority. So thank you again for this opportunity, and I'll kick it over to Jennifer Davis.
Okay, great. So today's work session is, as everyone has said, about making decisions about which of the 27 code amendments. So this list should be in front of you. For you, it's orange. I have a black and white copy. At the top, it says Thurston County 2020/2021 Preliminary Development Code Docket. It's dated April 15th. It was provided at your last work session. And we're going to go one by one down the list. And there are 27 items, which is why the 3-hour meeting, I think. And just like last week's briefing, we'll follow along in order. Staff will, and Maya and I will do a little tag teaming on this, and there's other staff to help support us. We'll give a little description of what the proposal is about, where it came from, whether it has a clear path forward or maybe a more complex or difficult path forward, and then allow some Q&A with you to make sure you have all the information you need to make your decision. Again, the 3 decisions before you are put the item forward to the 2020-2021 official docket of development code amendments, or hold the item and keep it on our preliminary docket for perhaps later legislative work when it becomes, when we have time and capacity to work on it, or remove it from consideration and we would drop it from the docket. So those are the 3 decisions.
Hey, Jennifer, I have a question about process.
Yes, go ahead.
Because last time, I think it was Commissioner Menser suggested we go through all of them and then go back for decision making. I think this, and correct me if I'm wrong, I think this is going to go a little quicker than last week's process, but I could be wrong. What is best for staff? And then I'll ask the commissioners what's best for commissioners.
We're open. You can do it any way you like, as long as we get kind of a decision and maybe a sense of your feelings about its priority in terms of our work. That's all we're looking for.
Okay. Commissioner Menser, any thoughts?
Given where we are, I could go either way because I think last session gave me a good sense of, how some of the bigger items and what kind of staff demands that's going to. So I could be, given where we're at and the work we've already done, I could go piece by piece today if you and Commissioner Edwards would rather do it that way. I'm flexible either way.
Okay. And I created a couple weeks ago my list of every one of these with a yes, no, and what it was, and or hold or pause, whatever. So I'm ready to go piecemeal as well. But Commissioner Edwards, what do you think, sir? What would help you out?
I'm good with exactly what Commissioner Menser said. Possibly as we go through these, if we come up with one that we're a little hung up on, maybe we could set that aside for a little more discussion.
Yeah, that sounds good.
Perfect. Okay. Thank you. Jennifer, you're on.
Great. Awesome. So that's what we'll do. Before we get into it, though, a little more context. So development amendment proposals come to us from has asked for a code change. There's been a change in federal or state law that requires us to change our code. Staff may have requested the change to clarify the code or streamline regulations for our applicants and citizens. Or a citizen or a private entity has filed a code change application with us. And I want to be very clear that we do not charge fees for code change applications. Our work on the development code amendments is primarily general fund work, unless we have a funding agreement or a grant supporting it. So that's sort of where we come from. And you'll see items on this list that come from last year's official docket. Some items have been around for a while and we may or may not have initiated staff work. We'll tell you for each one kind of where we are in the process. And some of them are brand new this year. So with that, I'm going to jump right in and start with A5 on the top of your list. The title is Review of Administrative Variance Limits in Zoning Ordinances. And we're going to start with what we think is an easy one because this is a staff-initiated proposal. It's been around for a while. There's been no staff work specifically done for this proposal. And during this docketing process, we kind of polled staff and went back and talked with folks. And we find that it isn't really a priority for staff anymore. It doesn't fulfill an immediate business need. It's sort of a holdover from the past. So we're comfortable recommending that we simply remove this from the docket. We have more targeted code changes that come from staff on the docket that focus in on the type of administrative variance issues that this one was trying to get at. And so we don't really need A5 at this time, and that's our staff recommendation.
And just to
Go ahead.
carry on that just a little bit, the staff recommendation is relating to if it serves citizens or not. And so
Right.
the perspective is that this item, we can serve citizens in different and more efficient ways, so we don't need to have this item.
And that's
Any
why,
questions? Oh,
well, that's why you had that sentence in there that there's no immediate business need. I concur with your recommendation to remove it. Commissioner Edwards?
I guess I'm always curious on these, why were they put on originally? What was the original intent that staff felt this was something that needed to be addressed? And I see we did have a comment on it, and I'm wondering what that was and why somebody chose to comment. So was somebody's application held up, or, well, I don't know. I just, I'm gonna probably go along with your recommendation, but I think because the public is involved with us on this, they ought to at least hear, okay, it was put on originally when and why.
Well, it looks like it
Now
was
we
put on in
decide.
2018.
it was put on in 2018. No staff work was done on it. I think that's because it wasn't scoped very narrowly enough for us to jump in and do some work on it. But originally, it was to review all of our administrative variance processes and allowances throughout all of our zoning ordinances to try to provide administrative flexibility as opposed to taking most of those to the hearings examiner. Staff did look at that, and you'll see reflected on the docket with some later items. Staff has targeted in on a couple of those administrative variances that we want to, that are sort of an immediate need for citizens to serve an immediate business need. One of those is RUEs, resource use exceptions, or sorry. Yeah. So we're gonna address the issues that were brought up in A5 in sort of more targeted ways, I think, is the approach that we want to take as staff. So I think we're still interested in providing citizens with administrative pathways wherever we can, as opposed to going to the hearings examiner. Yeah. Go ahead.
If my memory serves me right, it was about coming up with justification for tabletop reviews instead of going to a hearings examiner, it seemed like. Are we still going to be able to do that? Are citizens gonna have that option, and staff is gonna have that option even if we don't put this in place?
We do have a lot of administrative pathways and avenues right now. If we don't put this one in place, on the docket later is something that we do want to tackle, which is RUEs, and we're going to talk about that, reasonable use exceptions under our critical areas ordinance. That's kind of the major area that we get a lot of the need for maybe a tabletop approach versus going to the hearings examiner. So we're going to address the kind of highest priority we feel that citizens are facing under this kind of global issue of administrative versus hearings examiner path, hopefully on this docket cycle if you choose to put it forward.
Right. So Commissioner Edwards, the answer to your question is yes.
But, it sounds like I'm hearing from the board chair that we're gonna remove it.
So
Well, no, you're not hearing from me.
Well, I thought-
That's my,
Yeah,
I
I mean,
agree
that's,
with staff.
I guess, because that's staff recommendation, and I'm fine with that myself. I haven't heard from Ty, but.
Commissioner Menzer.
Yeah, I was gonna sideways thumb this one, but based on Jennifer's comments, I can vote to remove it.
Because you can still get the work done if we remove it, correct?
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Okay.
So,
that's
just
important.
for the public, I'm gonna try to record your vote.
Oh, yes, thank you.
So on A5, item A5 is unanimously, the board has agreed to drop this item.
Remove it from the preliminary docket, yes. And that's unanimous.
All right.
Yay.
One day down, 26 to go. Like it. Okay, the next one is item A7. It's a review of our low impact development standards. So when it was docketed in the past by the board asked staff to take a look at the low impact development ordinance, which has been kind of recently adopted in 2016, to respond to some issues that inevitably come up after you implement a brand new ordinance. Wanted to make sure that the ordinance was operating clearly and efficiently for citizens who had to apply the low impact development regulations to their development projects. Staff has done some initial review, and a clear issue that has been identified we call the small fix, which would amend how the ordinance applies to properties that are 2.5 acres or smaller. There were some difficulties in applying the low impact development standards to those small properties and making them work for everyone. So that small fix has a very clear path forward. As for a larger wholesale review of the ordinance and how it's working on a more general level, that path is a little less clear. That's going to require additional staff work and resources and more scoping. So if the board wants to revisit the entire 2016 LID ordinance, we can docket it that way. If the smaller fix is your focus, we can just docket it to do that.
Josh, did you want to weigh in, Josh, a little bit more or no? Okay. Commissioner Edwards, go ahead.
Okay, this one, and I don't know if this is going to be a large process or a small process that, you know, that we can single out a certain area. But where this has really been a stickler for a lot of citizens trying to do something on their property is the pervious impervious soil change that went from 70% to 10%. And it didn't consider the detrimental impact that long driveways would have. I know kind of on the borderline with Commissioner Hutch and myself, there was a shared driveway issue over there in East Olympia that became quite a problem. There was a lady that had a 5-acre parcel and a long driveway to the back of that property from the road. And because of that limitation, she wasn't able to build her daughter a small horse barn because it would have been too much impervious coverage then. And that had to do with the length of the driveway. So those are a couple of examples where 10% just wasn't reasonable. And I've been advocating that it used to be 70%. I thought, well, for a compromise, 30% seems reasonable so that these type of restrictions wouldn't hinder people from doing otherwise illegal activity on their property. So that's why, and I don't know if just adjusting that percentage is a small thing that you could do relatively easily, or if it takes a total review. So I'm a little confused by your comment that we can do a little bit of something or a lot of something. So I'm confused on that issue.
Commissioner Menser?
Yes, well, I'm supportive of the what Jennifer calls the small fix, because I've spoken to a number of citizens who have explained to me some inflexibility that I think staff last year, when they outlined this item, explained that we could do without detrimentally affecting the environment and stormwater runoff issues. We could be a little more flexible on those small properties. So, and on top of that, this has been on the docket, and there's been significant, according to my notes, significant staff work already invested. So I'm all in favor of what Jennifer's called the small fix. I'm not interested in an overhaul. I think I really support low impact development in general. Thurston County has a good, strong ordinance, and I want to make sure we stay, strong on this issue in general. But we do have to make sure that there's enough flexibility that we're not getting irrational and unreasonable results for citizens. And I think all the examples that Commissioner Edwards has brought up over the last year, I think are small kind of parcels that fall into that 2.5 acre and less. So I'm hopeful that the work that we're working toward now is going to really address 95% of our issues. So that's where I'm at. I'm supporting this docket item on the small scale.
And
So hang on just a quick second. This was added in July of 2017, or 2018 rather. No, 2017. And staff's done some work on it, but as it's listed in the docket analysis, that this has been identified as a high priority, yet staff capacity was an issue in completing it. And I don't know if that's going to play a major factor in moving ahead with this thing, even if we just do the small fix. So I'll need to know what kind of staff time that would take to do the small fix, if it's still medium or not, and if staff capacity is going to be an issue, because that concerns me. But my constituents as well would benefit greatly from the small fix, getting these little, I don't want to say nitpicky, but I just did, little nuances that cause them a lot of headache to get these things taken care of.
Okay,
So John?
Josh, if I may, can you provide a little bit of history? Because I
Yeah.
believe this was included on the comprehensive plan amendment docket. I believe as of last year. And staff came last year as to how we can expedite this process by including into the development code docket and be narrowly focused on some of the concerns that you heard from the board. Can you provide that perspective?
Well, you just gave the right history. That was it, exactly. So, and I think to address Commissioner Edwards' concern, we share that exact same concern. And this is where the development code, Jennifer's group, setting the stage for the rules of the game essentially, connects with Brett's group, the group that's implementing the rules, talking to the citizens that have these issues. And one of the kind of the sticky points that I think is kind of sticking with the commissioners that have experienced the difficulties from citizens in the past is the implementation part. The way that we've taken the rules and implemented them with the staff, that's Brett's group. Brett has been working to think about those rules in a way and implementing them with the guidance from the commissioners to allow citizens to do with their land what they want within code and ordinance. And what we've seen is that it's the 2.5 acres and below that Brett kind of keeps coming up against the wall, Brett's team. And so we think that the urgent fix at the high impact and service to citizens is, and I wouldn't call it a small fix. I think that we're calling it small because it's 2.5 acres and below. I'd call it a really big fix for the citizens who have 2.5 acres and below in the way that we implement LID. And so the staff's recommendation continues to be, just as Ramiro said, let our coordinated teams in CPED try and find this fix, which we think we've got a handle on in low impact development. And then if we get that problem resolved, then we can say, you know what, there is this larger issue potentially of the wholesale review. But it seems that from our perspective, let's fix what we know that we can and then see if there's another problem. At this point, it seems less than ideal to use time in the bigger issue if the smaller 2.5 acres and below is the actual issue. And that's why staff's recommendation is to keep this going forward in service to the citizens.
All right, Gary?
I agree with you, except the 2.5 acres, because the properties that I'm referring to that were in question over at East Olympia, the other one I'm talking about where the lady had the long driveway, those were on 5-acre parcels. And
again,
so I don't want this squeezed down to 2.5 when the problems I'm referring to are 5-acre parcels. So I don't know if there were other situations or not, but I think I'm aware of 5 or 6 total, but they were all 5 acres, so not 2.5.
So let me try
We don't
one more
want to
time.
lock in on 2.5.
Go ahead, Josh.
Okay, I'm going to try it again. So the way that Brett has been implementing the full LID code is that's been the issue in the past for 2.5 and above. And Brett's group has done a great job of working with those 2.5 and above.
Okay, that, the term above thrown in there makes a big difference.
And then the
Yeah.
second issue is Brett's had a hard time with the 2.5 and below. So I want Brett to stay the course and revisit some of those 2.5 and above in the implementation, but we need the fix to help the 2.5 and below. So you totally understand your issue for sure.
Okay.
Good, thank you. Ty, anything further?
Nope.
Okay, so commissioners, what are we going to do? Add it to the 2021, maintain it for 20, or put the pause, or remove it?
No, I wanna put a priority on it to get the darn thing fixed.
And I concur with
Sooner.
staff recommendation as well. Ty?
Sooner than better.
Yeah, I
Sooner than
support
later.
staff recommendation on that one.
Okay. Do you have that, Romero? It's unanimous?
So item A7, unanimously to include it into the docket.
Yes.
With a priority, can you make that note? 'Cause
We'll
I
maintain.
made the note.
you
Yeah.
made the note, okay.
I watched you.
I put an asterisk on it. Okay,
Ask
the
for
next,
Ramiro's,
Oh.
ask for Ramiro's fancy arrow system.
oh, okay.
Yeah.
Okay, A9.
All right, I'm gonna let Maya field this one for you.
So A9 is to amend the planned industrial park district to allow for correctional facilities, prisons as a special use. We do have a clear path forward on this one. We're currently in the middle of review, so this code item is currently with the Planning Commission. There's a lot of growing interest on this proposal, as you know, from several citizen comments you've been receiving recently. Since the docket closed, we've received 50 additional comments on this item. If you put this item on the official docket, you're allowing that process to continue, and there will be plenty of additional opportunities for the public to provide formal input. The decision will be further down the road after it's reviewed with the Planning Commission. If you remove it from the docket, then work would stop on this item. And we do have a funding agreement with the Department of Corrections to complete this code item.
Okay, so you're right. This is kind of a hot topic for the community, and I heard quite a bit when I was down there for the open house.
Mhm.
And so my thinking is that it's within a mile or 2 miles of the schools, and we have ordinances that prohibit that. There's issues with the aquifer sharing, issues with potential traffic, but the big thing that scares me is protecting our babies and our kids. There's already a history of an escape from that facility, and the escapee burglarized the school district office. So I am very much in favor of removing this from the docket. Commissioner
Well, let me
Minzer? Go ahead, Josh.
Let me just tack on a little bit to Maya's last statement. So the funding agreement that we have is to complete the code item process, not the outcome. And so what the Department of Corrections has provided for us to do is to have the conversation with the community. And that's the process that we're asking about, whether or not you want to continue to have that conversation with the community or not. It's at this point, like Maya said, not the decision on the outcome.
Got it. And my thinking is I've heard from the community, and I'm done. Who wants to go next? Edward, you have your hands up. Go ahead, Gary.
By any chance, we're out of those, I think you said 50 comments. How many positive, how many negative?
There was one comment in favor, and the other, I think there were 58 total, and 57 of them were against.
Okay, my follow-up to that would be that the state is going into some serious budgetary problems right now because of the situation that we're in today. And I don't think we ought to be spinning our wheels on something that might not even get close to going anywhere. So I'm gonna second Commissioner Hutch's position.
Yeah, I don't care whether the state has money or not. I don't want to
Okay,
go forward with it.
but I mean, there's just no point in spinning our wheels, I don't believe.
Yeah.
The
Commissioner
public's
Minzer.
spoken a lot about it. So.
That'll be a unanimous decision. I'd like to remove it.
Okay.
Just a quick clarification from staff. Has the Department of Corrections had an opportunity to engage with the board on this topic?
I don't know of any direct communications or briefings between DOC and the board. I don't know that they submitted a comment in the docket period either, but they have engaged with the Planning Commission.
Okay.
Can I just ask a question? I wasn't sure, I didn't realize this was going to be such an easy decision, but in the letter that I received from the Rochester School District, they make the statement that county regulations require that jails be located at least 1 mile from any school and any site from which a special use application for a school has been submitted, and that prisons and pre-release facilities be not less than 2 miles from a school. And then they have a chart indicating that both Rochester Primary School, Grand Mount Elementary School, and Rochester High School are all three within the boundaries of that regulation. So how is that going to be, how is that planning to be addressed?
Well, that would require a change to those regulations. That's part of the amendment that's been proposed. Would be
That's
to
part of the
change
package
those.
of work that you guys are working on?
That's right. To allow for I think in the current draft, it would be to allow for the hearings examiner, because it's a special use permit, to be flexible on those distance requirements.
And
Yeah, I mean, I just want to say, because last year we didn't have the public input. I was brand new, and this one was on a list of we'd been working on it, and the state was funding piece of it, and I actually, I'll be honest, I actually thought I had the wrong location in my head. I thought this was Cedar Creek location, I didn't realize where Maple Lane exactly was. I had no idea that it was where it is, right in the middle of our growing Grand Mount community and so close to schools. Also didn't realize that the juvenile rehabilitation school was planned to be something, much, much more larger. I actually found my notes from last year's docketing planning sessions, and 700 beds. I know they're not sure what they're going to do, but there's a possibility this is up to a 700 bed prison, which is absolutely not going to fly in that location at this time. So I just want people to understand. They may be confused. Well, why weren't some of these concerns raised last year? Because I remember there really wasn't much fuss about this docket item last year, but I've learned a lot about this item. I've gotten input from all sorts of folks in the community. Some are activist groups, but others are very local people. For example, the Rochester School District, and and I think that I agree with my seatmates on this one.
Well, when I did the open house in Grand Mound for the sub area, when I left that open house, before I pulled out of the driveway and before I get up to speed on the highway, there was the prison. And I thought, oh, good grief, it's that close. And then Rochester Superintendent Kim Fry, when I read her letter, that was the nail in the coffin for me, just for the protection of the children's sake. Before I get you, Ramiro, Maya, you had your hand up a little bit ago. Were you going to say something?
I think it got covered in the discussion.
Okay, Ramiro, go ahead, sir.
I'd like to go back to the question whether the Department of Corrections came and briefed the board. They did. 3.5 years ago, maybe 4 years ago, briefed the board. But at that time, they have a different plan. They had a different proposal. And at that point, the board decided to include this item on the docket based on that proposal. And also that was predicated on the state funding that particular proposal, which they didn't. So it was a period of time in which this item didn't go through it because the state didn't fund the study or the agreement that Jennifer's stating. So when this came back, as part of that, they changed as to what they wanted to do on this property. And that's the proposal they have before you. Just a little piece of history on that.
Thank you, sir. All right, Jennifer, A16.
Okay. A16, site plan review. So this has a really long title, and what we've boiled it down to is actually simply to amend our critical area determination process. And you've heard about this. We've been before you, Brett's been before you with this item. And it's already been through the Planning Commission with a recommendation. And so A16 has really, as staff has worked on it, it's narrowed its focus to amending our critical area determinations to line up the validity period of a gopher review with the protocol that the board has adopted. So to make sure that when we have a protocol in place that the board adopted that says you get your site surveyed, there's a finding of no gophers, that's good for 3 years. That's the protocol. Unfortunately, our code still has a 1 year validity period in the code for those reviews. And so this is about aligning the protocol with the code. So we need to amend the code. This has been through the Planning Commission. They have a recommendation on this item. And the next step would be for Brett actually to come to the board, do a briefing, and then you would schedule a public hearing and take action. So we're well on our way to completion actually of this item, and then it would be done.
Well, like you say, staff resources needed are low. Been working on already, and getting these things in alignment. I found this to be very, very important. So I'm looking forward to adding it. But I hear from Commissioner Menser.
I'm good. Thumb up.
Yep,
Commissioner
same thing.
Edwards,
Same thing.
was that a thumbs up?
Yep.
Okay.
Okay, so.
Unanimous, Romero.
16.
Thank you for that. I just wanted to also add, this is one of those targeted successes that we talked about at the beginning in service to citizens. So huge thanks to the staff for finding that opportunity. Thank you
Yeah.
for your vote.
So item A16, 3-0 to add it.
Are you ready for A6?
Yeah, add it and get it done.
think actually-
A16.
A16, wait, A17?
No, we're on A6.
A6 now.
The SMP CAO revisions.
So
Okay,
A- A6 is SMP, CAO, and other revisions to ensure consistency with the Shoreline Master Program update. So this item, we have a clear path forward. It's a placeholder for future work.
Maya, just
Mhm.
one second, Maya. So Commissioner Hutchings,
Yeah.
A17, one
Yep.
of the one pager in your packet.
Yep.
That was the preliminary plat extension of time, and that was successful. So that's completed. So
Yeah, I apologize, Commissioner Hutchins.
Oh.
I apologize. I realized that I have muted my microphone, so I failed to record the vote on A16. So A16 is 3-0 to add it.
yes, it's unanimous to add it.
Yeah, so thank you. Just realized that. Sorry.
Got it. And I see A17, I have my notes here, it's already been completed. So that makes sense. Good, thank you.
great work on that from the team. Again, a targeted success for the citizens of Thurston County.
Yeah, thank you, Josh, for clarifying that.
Thanks.
So A6 SMP CAO revisions, we do have a clear path forward for this one. It's a placeholder for future work. So currently, community planning staff is working on the Shoreline Master Program update, and that will likely be coming to the board for their review at the end of 2020. The Planning Commission is working hard on that at this time. After the Shoreline Master Program is adopted, there will likely be some amendments to our other county codes and regulations that reference the Shoreline Master Program. So this item ensures consistency between our code and that program once it's adopted.
Okay. So the recommendation is to maintain it on the 21, 22. And that's where I am. Commissioner Edwards?
Yep.
Commissioner Menser?
I'm up.
Okay.
So
So
item,
it's unanimous to maintain it for the 21, 22 preliminary docket.
okay, so you're recording the vote, Commissioner, or I'm doing that? So.
You are.
Okay,
I'm just saying it for anybody on the phone.
So A6 is 3-0 to add it to the docket.
Okay.
No, was it to add the docket? Hang on, adding or maintaining it on the preliminary? 2021 to
I
21,
believe it's
22.
added to the docket.
Okay,
Is, Jennifer?
Adding it to the official docket, I believe, was
Adding it,
the
okay.
intent of the vote.
okay,
Because
Thank you.
going back to Jennifer's options is add it, put in the preliminary docket, or remove it.
add it.
Yeah, add it, preliminary docket, or remove it.
Okay.
Well, I'm waiting for the other two seatmates.
Add it.
Okay. Gary, good?
Yeah.
Okay,
Okay. Got it?
Yeah.
A8, the Habitat Conservation Plan Implementation Ordinance. So this is looking forward to the day where we have a habitat conservation plan that's accepted and through the environmental review process, which could happen in 2020, 2021 docket cycle. So this is a placeholder to ensure that once that happens, we may bring to you the code changes necessary to implement that habitat conservation plan. There will be some pieces of our code that we want to update with the kind of process side and how we actually implement it on the ground. Staff's already working on that ahead of time, but we want it on here so we can bring it to you within this next docket period if we are fortunate enough to have it ready.
yeah. For that reason, yep. Commissioner Edwards, that thumbs
Yeah.
up or no?
Yeah,
Thank you.
So item 8.8, 302 added.
Joining the conference.
So A13 is miscellaneous clerical errors. This is a docket item that community planning brings periodically. It's really to address minor corrections, things like department names that are outdated or references that are outdated in the code.
Okay,
I do have a question about this, though.
yep.
You mean to say that you can't make clerical adjustments without waiting a year and going through this process? Is that what I'm hearing?
Well, we can make, so the good news about development code amendments is that sometimes we can take care of them quite quickly. We don't have to do them like a comprehensive plan amendment. We can only make changes to our comprehensive plan once a year. With our development code, as soon as we're ready, we can bring it to you. So this is just a matter of doing the work. And so once we have corrected the items that we need to correct, we'll bring it to you as a long redlined strike through and replace document with all of our updates and changes that won't have any policy or regulatory implications. They are simply housekeeping.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, this item provides the umbrella for staff to go through those items through the year.
Just another bureaucratic process.
Not necessarily, it's not like the changes are waiting. It just allows for, when the changes are needed, the staff will bring back to the board for changes.
Okay,
Yeah, I mean, this is a check and balance on you guys being the leaders.
okay.
All right, A15.
So A13 is vote 3-0 to add it.
Yes,
So A15 is change the name of Chapter 2060 Violations and Enforcement to Administrative Procedures. So this is just a name change of the chapter title. The code enforcement section was moved to Title 26 in 2016, but the name didn't get updated. So this is just a housekeeping item to correct the name of that chapter.
So did this need a thumbs up too? I mean, to change a name, we have to go through all this process too. Okay,
Yeah.
got it.
all right,
So item A15, 3-0 to add it.
yes.
All right. So go ahead.
I coughed.
Oh, I don't know what you say to a cough. It's not bless you. I'm not sure.
No, it's, what'd you say?
Hope you make it.
Oh, Lord. Dark times. Okay, 818, Voluntary Stewardship Program. So this one has a clear path forward, but it needs a little explanation. So the county's Voluntary Stewardship Program was approved by the state, and we have an adopted local work plan that's being successfully implemented around Thurston County through our service provider, who is the Thurston Conservation District. To date, we have 42 folks participating in that plan. They have either individual stewardship plans that they're developing with Thurston Conservation District. 11 people have completed those individual stewardship plans and are waiting to get final signature. And then 15 people have totally completed it and signed it, and the planning process is totally complete. So we're having great success with the implementation of the Voluntary Stewardship Program. This docket item is not about that work plan or the work that the Thurston Conservation District or the VSP work group is doing. It's about actually going back in and bringing our codes into alignment with that plan. So one of the things we've learned through the development of the Voluntary Stewardship Program is that we need to update Chapter 1715 in our code, which is our very old and outdated code that deals with critical areas on agricultural lands. So in order to fully implement the vision of VSP, we need to update the Thurston County Agriculture Activities Critical Areas Ordinance, which is Chapter 1715. So if this is docketed, staff recommends that we change the title of it so it doesn't confuse the public to simply to update the Thurston County Ag Activities Critical Areas Ordinance, Chapter 1715, because that's what we're doing.
And so the R&D on this will be done this year.
The R&D on this?
The research and development on this.
Yes, we
code
actually
change?
have. Yes, we're actually well into updating or creating a draft, and we hope to bring that to the Planning Commission in a few months, probably.
Okay. Commissioner Menser?
I'm good with it.
Commissioner Edwards?
Good.
I'm good.
So item 818 is 3-0 to add this item to the docket and change the title.
Yeah, Josh, did you have something to say? I'm sorry.
Nope, just wanted to point out again, this is one of those items that provides flexibility, and bringing our code up to date helps farmers in our community. So,
Yep, okay.
Mm-hmm.
Very good. Thank you.
All right, A19, the Wireless Communications Facilities Code. So it's a clear path forward on this one. There's a lot of work involved. Updating our wireless code gets us into compliance with a federal rule change around wireless regulation. So this is one of those where the source for this code change comes from a change to federal law. So we need to be in compliance. So we need to update our code. We have had a lot of public interest in this. There are folks in our community concerned with the expansion of 5G into rural areas. The prosecuting attorney's office has actually been a lead on this project, as well as our planning staff and community planning. We're well into developing drafts. We held a stakeholder meeting with industry in early January, and the goal would be to have the Title 20, our rural zoning code, updated and in compliance with the federal rules by the end of 2020.
I have a
Is this-
question.
And this is FCC required?
Yes, it is. And Travis is on the line if he wants to sort of chime in with any of the kind of legal side of the rule changes. But yes.
I have a question about this.
Yeah, go ahead. I want Gary to go first. Go ahead, Gary.
Why is it that we have to put a lot of work into this if it's just a federal requirement anyway? Why can't we just refer to that, include that in our docket and move on? You made that sound like there's a lot of work yet to be done. I'm trying to figure that one out.
Well, the work that has to be done, and Travis, I'm looking at you to help me here, but has to be, we have to untangle all the places in our code that currently describes the permitting process for wireless communication facilities and create a different sort of permitting process with different timelines to be in compliance with the federal code. So that takes a bit of a reorganization of our code, which takes some work. And there are also, we have opportunities to serve our citizens by having design guidelines around how these new cell towers and facilities look in different parts of our community. And people are very interested in that and maintaining sort of our local control over the design and how these things kind of look and feel out there on the landscape. Travis, if I've said anything, or Brett, even if I've said anything out of line, please correct me.
You're not out of line. What I would just add is, Commissioner Edwards, that was my first reaction when I came aboard and we had this code change and we had a consultant on board. I said, hey, why can't we get this done? It's been sitting on the docket for, well, not the docket, but it's been worked on for some time now. And the answer is that the SEC rules are complex enough that it's not just a matter of saying that the county will essentially comply with federal law. We actually have to build a process in to deal with shorter timeframes and what the feds and the SEC call no unreasonable barriers to applicants. And so to do that with so many technical determinations that we have to make, including design review, we have to work in a way that is respectful of the citizens and meet with the actual telecommunications industry to understand what works for certain types of technologies. So, it's a very, unfortunately, it's sort of a merge of technical and legal analysis. And I will add that I urge you all to stay the course. And the reason is that at this point, if we were to receive an application for 5G, our current code would be ill-equipped to deal with that application. And, the concern is, it's already being deployed in cities and, the counties aren't that far behind. In fact, there's some areas, some counties are already seeing some action. So, I urge we stay the course. We're very close, as Jennifer mentioned, in terms of we have a working draft. And, if we were able to accomplish it by the end of the year, I think that would be a good thing.
Yes, Romero?
Yeah, as a follow-up to, what Jennifer and Travis mentioned, and maybe trying to provide additional response to Commissioner Edwards. And I think is I believe the FCC provide rules at this level and which provide allowance for any provider, let's pick on the 5G. But in order for the providers to provide 5G services, they need to implement smaller antennas on a more frequent matter. It's not just a single antenna as we know it now. And that is where the code is going to put some design parameters as to how those features should be placed in the county's right of way. The city of Tumwater has taken a step in passing a resolution because this is going to be an effect on their streets if they don't have control over how those antennas should be implemented on their right-of-way in the county to a lesser extent. But we need to have a means and methods, I believe, as to how we're going to be permitting those facilities to be placed in the county's right-of-way. And that is really is defining the means and methods as to how those providers will have to put facilities in the county's right away.
So is the work still, because one of the comments it says here is that that was against the proposal is the FCC rules aren't settled and it isn't worthwhile until that's, to do this until that's completed. Is that inaccurate?
Okay, the current SEC rules are in effect. They are not stayed at this point, so we are subject to them if and when we get an application. I think what the comment was geared towards that they're currently under appeal the federal Ninth Circuit, and so they are. There is some potential that they will change, Commissioner, in the future. But, and so the bottom line is, this is a rapidly changing regulatory arena, but we haven't even gotten to the baseline yet to deal with the existing rules, not to mention what may change in the future. So my recommendation, after a long conversation internally with our office and our consultant attorney, is that we do move forward regardless of what happens in the outcome of the litigation. Now we're monitoring that litigation to see how it may or may not affect, and we may make some moves before we adopt this. But again, it's still important for the county to move forward with these changes in order to deal with the existing law, which is not stayed at this point and is continues to be in effect. And I just want to, the county manager brought up a good point. This is not just a enviro or industry heavy change. One, it's important to enable the industry to move forward, but it's also important for the county to have a voice under current law. And so if the commission and the citizens care about how this deployment looks in our communities, this is the way that you engage, is through this code amendment in order to address the new regs. So it's not a, in my mind, it really is both enables a voice for the community and at the same time allows some path forward for the industries as the technologies change and affect our communities.
All right. Hey, before I get back to you, Gary, Commissioner Menser, do you want to weigh in? Go ahead.
I'm following advice of counsel on this one.
Okay, Gary, go ahead.
I guess, isn't this very much like a super utility, like the railroad, so to speak? I mean, they've already kind of laid out, they're gonna get their way. They've already got the legislation at the federal level, and it's coming, whether we want anything to do with it or not. Isn't that kind of the same situation where we don't really have any say in it, do we, Travis? Other than, like you say, maybe we want pink towers instead of green towers every 200 yards or something. But really, the gist of implementing this thing has already kind of become a done deal through the federal FCC, isn't it?
That's federal law, and that's what Travis stated. The law is in place. There is an appeal in the process. Whether that appeal is successful, that's yet to be seen, but the federal law is in place right now.
Yeah, and I would agree that regardless if the appeal is successful, there is some portion of that rule change will still impact us. And I think, from a practical standpoint, the technology is coming. It's questionable how it's coming, but if we're not engaged in some level, we can't participate, if that makes sense. So I think, Commissioner, you're correct. It is the industry is very aggressive on a federal level. Just recently, they want to try to preempt counties based on COVID in the recent crisis, which I know jurisdictions are pushing back on. So there's a lot of tension on this issue. But the one thing that's clear is that if we don't have an ordinance in place, we can't participate, and we cannot. Well, for one, we wouldn't be able to process an application, but for another part of it, we won't be able to participate with the public have some meaningful interface. But things will, as 5G comes out, things will be deployed faster. Counties will work with them to get that done. But if you don't have the work done up front, you got a big mess on your hands. That's not a legal term, but that kind of what would be the outcome if we let this wait too long and aren't prepared for the new technology.
Go ahead, Gary.
I just want to clarify though. So as we move ahead with this, because there's no stopping it, we're just trying to make a process available so the public will have some input, because there is public concern about it. Is that kind of what's coming down the pike? I hate to see a lot of effort that's maybe not necessary going into this when we have other issues that seem to be more pressing. I mean, I'm gonna go along with you on this. I'm just trying to understand why we seem to have an increased workload on this when we don't even know what the outcome of the court is gonna be yet.
And maybe it would be a good conversation when we talk about the prioritization.
I was gonna talk about that, yeah.
Okay,
So it sounds like we're all gonna go with staff and legal recommendation.
yes.
Yes.
Okay,
So item A19-302 added.
yep.
So item A20 is permitted childcare centers. This is a two-part code item. A portion of this is citizen initiated, and then the other portion of this is a legal component. So the citizen initiated portion is to expand childcare centers as a permitted use in rural commercial zones. And the compliance with state law would be to allow family daycare providers in the same area as a single family housing. So this is a clear path forward code item.
Okay. Is it, you say it's associated with another one that we're coming up to?
It's not associated with another one. So on the April 15th briefing item, there were two dates for when it was initiated, 2004 and 2016. The citizen piece was in 2004, and that was combined with the 2016 piece, which is the legal component. So it's both folded into the same docket item.
Okay, thank you, Maya.
Mhm.
Commissioner Manser,
That citizen still alive?
Commissioner Edwards?
Yeah, I think it's a good idea. There's a lot of people that are hopefully gonna go back to work that need childcare. I think closer to their residence is better than farther away. So,
Okay, good, because I have it on here to add.
So what I'm hearing is item A20-302 added.
yes.
Yeah.
All right. A21, rural accessory dwelling units. So this is another one where we do have a clear path forward. It will take some staff resources, but we have a lot of public interest in figuring out how we can amend our codes to provide for accessory dwelling units in our rural residential areas. The cities provide for ADUs, the urban growth areas provide for ADUs. They are not provided for in rural residential areas. Staff has been working with Olympia Master Builders, who is supportive of this. We've met with them and maintained ongoing contact to discuss sort of the appropriate options we would want to do in rural areas for ADUs. Some of the goals of this code change are to provide a new source of affordable housing. I know that Joint Base Lewis McChord has been very interested in seeing more accessory dwelling units in the area to support soldiers and small families. We also have a goal of making sure that we support aging in place and sort of other local housing needs that are not well supported now in our code and the options in our code. We do need to ensure that what we come up with is permissible under the Growth Management Act. Different standards apply to rural areas than do to urban areas. And so we just need to craft our code change carefully. And we're looking at all the aspects of that now with Olympia Master Builders and others in the community. And the goal really is we don't want to create a package of regulations that makes it, at the end of the day, overly costly or burdensome to construct an ADU. That sort of defeats the purpose of it being an affordable housing option. And that's something that the cities sometimes have run into. So we're learning from others. We also want to address other things like septic and water system connection and make sure we really have a smooth and seamless package going forward. So this proposal has been around for a little while. It was previously on our comprehensive plan docket. We thought we might need a housing policy change to support it, but with the update of our housing policies by you in 2019, we really don't need to amend anything in our comp plan to allow for this change. So we just moved it onto the development code docket.
All right, Josh, anything to say?
Again, this is one of those places where we think we've got a path forward on serving citizens. We've heard the input and how this would help our community, and I support the staff's recommendation to continue to move forward.
Gary?
No, I wanna move it forward. I wanna put a priority on it, move it forward.
Okay. Commissioner Menser? Okay, there it is, unanimous.
So item A21, 302 audit.
Item A22 is rewrite the boundary line adjustment standards. So this item brings our current code language into consistency with state law language. There's some language around adding conditions after approvals, and this would make sure our code language is consistent with state law.
Okay, is required. So I don't have any issue with that. Commissioner Messer, is a thumbs up, Gary?
Yes, I'd just like clarification though. Is this going to make it a little easier for citizens to make adjustments to their property lines as long as they're not cutting property sizes down or something so it goes under code or that type of thing? But a lot of times, I'm particularly familiar with a family operation in which they had a large parcel and they wanted to split it between two siblings or something like that. And it was a nightmare for them to go through this. Is this gonna make it easier?
Yes, so this code item would provide more clarity for people who need to go through that process.
Okay, good enough. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Maya.
So item A22, 302 audit.
Okay.
823.
A23. So this is another placeholder that we have in case we need it during this upcoming docket cycle. It has to do with rural water availability. So our response to the Hearst fix, the Hearst decision. And we need it on here because we're going through our watershed planning processes right now. We have one adopted plan in Nisqually and the rest are in process. Ecology still has the option of doing some additional rulemaking around water availability. And if they did that, we need to make changes to our code to be consistent with that change of law. So again, it's a placeholder discussion. In our watershed plans, there are some recommendations that could come out of there around critical aquifer recharge regulations to allow infiltration, to make sure we're allowing for rainwater collection, proximity of wells near streams, other ideas that I've seen in draft versions of the watershed plan. So again, we don't know, unfortunately, what the details are, but we need to have it on the docket if we want to be able to act on it in a timely manner if something comes up in the next 2 years.
Okay. Seems obvious. Commissioner Edwards, thumbs up?
No comment. I'm good.
Okay. Menser, Ty?
We don't harm ourselves by having it on there in the sense that if the changes aren't needed, then the staff can work harder on one of the other items, right?
Exactly. Exactly.
I'm good.
Okay.
So item A23, 302 audit.
Item A24 is a resource use title notice for mineral lands, agriculture, and forestry. So this item has been on the docket for quite some time, and it has a difficult path forward. It could be challenging to enforce this item. The concept has been around for many years and it's evolved over time. And staff has done some preliminary research on it. So currently we require resource use notices for new development adjacent to mineral, forestry, or ag lands. This would be a new title notice that would occur at the sale of a property. So it's unclear how the county could enforce that type of notice. We're already compliant with state law in the notices that we do. So this would be a difficult path forward. It's something that staff would recommend either keeping on the preliminary docket or removing.
Well, just all those things that you just mentioned, Maya, challenging to enforce and capacity, our staff capacity has been an issue for completing this thing. I'm all for maintaining it rather than removing it, but I'll listen to my seatmates. Commissioner Menser?
So one question I had on this was on the briefing sheet in the binder, it says location. designated long-term resource lands. Currently 41% of the county. After mineral lands update, 75%. Can you explain that a little bit?
Right, so this only applies to our designated resource lands of long-term commercial significance. So currently, the big ones are agriculture and forestry. The acreage could be changing dependent on the mineral lands review. So that 40 to 75% is in flux. It would depend on the outcome of the mineral lands review.
And 75% of rural county would then potentially be subject to this notice. And can you just kind of boil down from a policy perspective? What is it like? My understanding is this is trying to give folks who buy a parcel of land kind of notice about what county zoning activities have been allowed in their vicinity, so that they don't complain or are on notice, can make a good decision about whether they want to buy that property. And then from our perspective, can't really complain about it later if they had full notice going in, eyes wide open. Is that
Right.
an accurate characterization?
That's exactly correct. And I will add, the notice that we do is recorded with the property when it's built. So we do record a notice for those areas at the time of construction. This would be a different thing that you'd sign at the time of sale.
So why, if we're already doing it at construction and then the sale is kind of a clear point in time, why are you saying that it would be hard for us to administer or enforce it?
The county, I mean, we'd have to work with the realtor community, but it could be challenging to verify if those forms are being signed. Jennifer, do you have anything to add?
I just, not being a realtor, I'm not sure what the nexus would be to alert the county of the sale of a property from one person to another, so that we could somehow enforce or ensure that this notice is being recorded at the time of sale. Again, that would have to go through with pretty close work with our real estate community. And I think that's why we say it's difficult, because we're not sure how we would do this.
Is the Thurston County Ag Committee still have high interest in this?
So the Thurston County Ag Advisory Committee has always been interested in our resource use notices, because again, like Commissioner Mencher spelled out, the ones that we currently do are the coming to the nuisance sort of notices that put people on notice who are going to build something near an active forestry, mining, ag operation. So they're generally supportive of that type of notice. I'm not sure, I'd have to look whether they weighed in specifically on this particular notice that would be placed on the real estate transaction.
Okay. They weren't listed as a key stakeholder, but they're the ones that brought this forward 13 years ago.
Right, and it was specifically recommended for farm in those discussions when it originated, but as I mentioned, it's been 15 years and it's evolved over time, so.
So when I got in my head, when I did my homework on this a while back, was to maintain it on the 21-22. Is that what you're requesting or recommending?
We would recommend either maintaining it on the preliminary or removing it.
Or remove?
I think Ramiro has his hand up as well.
Oh, Ramiro, go ahead, please.
Thank you for noticing.
Gosh, you didn't send me a notice.
A question is and I don't know if the mineral lands map that we have been working for the last couple of years, where that fits in here? Is it fits in this item or fits somewhere else, or where we are on finalizing the approval of the mineral lands map?
So the mineral lands map and update is part of the comprehensive plan update, which is item number 1 on the comp plan docket. This is it's related in the fact that it may impact mineral lands depending on what the outcome is of that map, but the 2 docket items are not connected. They don't need to be docketed to go together.
Is that part of the CPA 1?
Yes,
Okay.
I think that's the number.
Gary, you have any
Where
questions
is
on
that
this?
located? Where is that CPA 1 located? Where is it?
That's The worksheet that we worked
Okay,
on
that's-
at last
yeah, but
week's
she said
briefing.
it was the number one, so it's not number
So
one, it's
that's what I
number
want to
two.
clarify, as part of the CPA 1 or the CPA 16?
For mineral lands specifically,
For the map,
CPA 1.
okay.
Oh, okay, I mean, I see where it says CPA 1, but it's number 2 on the list, I guess that's where I was confused about it.
Okay.
So this has nothing to do with that, is what I'm.
That's what I want to clarify.
That's correct. The two are separate.
And you don't see any benefit on working on it right now, is what I'm hearing, and you're even think it might be better to remove it? Is that what I'm hearing?
It's not a high priority item at this time. So because of the difficulty in enforcing, that's why we're recommending preliminary or remove. Jennifer, do you have anything to add?
No, just that staff perspective on code changes in general is if it's going to be something that's going to add something good for citizens, that is also something we can consistently enforce and back up with our work. We're all for it. If we have questions about whether a change is going to be enforceable or meaningful, that's when we'll raise sort of a concern. And that's the case for this one.
It says low and unknown public interest. Okay, Ty? Thoughts?
I'm leaning towards sideways thumb, but if you want to twist my arm to remove it, I could probably be convinced.
Well, I'm in the same boat because I put it down to maintain it on the 21-22 just so it didn't go away, but I don't care if we remove it. Yeah, I'm in the same boat.
Gary?
I guess my concern is that we have an adverse effect on some of our agricultural community or forestry community by removing it. So and I don't know if it is or not good for them because I haven't had any discussions with them on it. And I hate to take it off if it's gonna hurt some group out there that's more inclined to do something with ag or forestry. And if it doesn't have anything to do with mining, I'm not too worried about that one way or the other. So I just kind of question whether it's good to take it off because nobody seems to have too many concerns about it. Let's let it languish there a little bit unless we get some other comment on it from the public.
So you just did it for me. I'll maintain it on the 21-22 because that's why I originally had it on there.
Is
So
that
hold it.
okay with Ty as well? And-
Yep, that's good.
Okay.
So to clarify, 824-30 to put it on the preliminary docket.
Yeah.
Let's not break our unanimous streak
In the
here.
preliminary docket,
Which is not moving it ahead.
right.
Okay, good, yeah, okay.
So those are the
And so
options
just
that
to
you have
confirm-
is to add it, keep it on the preliminary, or remove it.
Remove it, yeah, okay.
Good. So I just wanted to add, to make sure that this is clear in our minds, in the future, when we talk about the number of docket items, this will be added to that number, right? We'll maintain that. So when you think about the work list that the staff has, and we talk about the 42 big items that we've always had, keeping it on the preliminary docket keeps it on that work list. And so when Commissioner Edwards talks about, why do we have so many items on this work list? What's going on here? This is keeping one of those items. So just
And as long as we don't have to work on it, it doesn't sound like it's gonna create a workload.
So this conversation that we're having right now is still work.
Well, okay, it's gonna take 2 minutes to type that in, I guess, but I don't want anybody working on
I
it.
just want to make sure that that's clear.
Okay,
Thank you for that clarification. Now we're at 825.
So 825 is the Forestlands conversion ordinance. This is another item that has been on the docket for several years, and it has somewhat of a complex path moving forward. So initially, this was docketed because the current planning group had identified some areas that could have improvements in that code. Because it's been such a long time, we engaged with our current development services and current planning group, and they've indicated that there's no need to make an update to this at this time. The permit process is moving well for citizens, and they're recommending that this is either maintained on the preliminary docket or removed altogether.
All right, anything to add, Josh or Jennifer? Okay, Ty?
Yeah, I have to completely disagree with that. This item is probably one of the most important items to me, for a couple of reasons. One is that I tried to work through some of these codes with the citizens, last year. They're completely confusing. They're in terrible need of updating. Staff, the CPED staff themselves couldn't really explain them to me, how they worked and how they intersected. And so there's that. Then there's the issue of our work with the climate mitigation planning, which is going to have some recommendations regarding the local jurisdictions updating their tree-related ordinances. So not only is it important for that, but now with COVID-19 kind of weighing in, and basically it's going to hamstring our ability to do anything with our climate plan that's going to require great expenditures of general fund money, which we're not going to have. I think it's going to reshuffle the priorities in that climate mitigation planning, and it's going to put regulatory things that don't cost us money out of our general fund are going to kind of gravitate up the list, is my prediction, because we're going to need to act. We're going to have community pressure to act, and cleaning up our tree ordinances is something very sensible that we can do. Plus, it needs to be done anyway. I mean, those laws are really unclear and not adequate. So I really think that this needs to be addressed. I'm not saying that it has to be. I'm not pushing it into one direction or another. I think this needs to be kind of a large scope where we kind of look comprehensively at what we have and what we could do and what the future holds. Those laws were not made with the scientific evidence about climate change that we have today. So, carbon sequestration and preserving the trees that we have is going to be a really important strategy, in my opinion. So I want to make sure that we move on this.
Gary?
Well, I guess considering what Commissioner Mintzer is laying out, it does look like this thing has been 16 years in the making. So plenty of opportunity for a number of different philosophies of boards of county commissioners to participate in moving this in one direction or another. So I would go along with Commissioner Mintzer as far as keeping it on the preliminary, but I can't see moving ahead with it as a priority item at this point in time. Okay,
Right.
so I don't know how that fits with Commissioner Mintzer.
Well, Robin,
rather than remove it.
Commissioner Mintzer mentioned general fund. Robin, do you have anything to add? Okay, no.
I have my hand up.
Oh, I see.
Jennifer,
But hey, I just want to mention one thing. I'll get you, Jennifer. I see that
Okay.
It says low staff resources needed, but it says at the bottom that staff capacity has been an issue in completing it. So where can you rectify that in my head?
Yeah, I think that you've called out something that's an interesting nuance when we tried to do this preliminary analysis for you. In the case where we don't really know what we're getting into, but we think it might be just a tweak or two to a code, we'll say low in terms of staff resources. But again, it's not risen up to a priority over time. And there's got to be a reason for that. I can only know from looking at the record. And I think it's because it's never been clearly scoped. What Commissioner Mintzer is discussing is kind of a broader scope and look at our tree protection ordinances and our Forestlands conversion ordinance, which would take this A25 into a little different direction. I do want to point out that last week on the comprehensive plan amendment docket, item CPA 10 was an urban forest ordinance proposal that I think the vote ended up being to hold that on the preliminary docket. And that would be a more comprehensive look at tree policies in our joint plans and tree codes in our UGAs and kind of the whole ball of wax. I think looking at the forest land conversion ordinance as part of that makes a lot of sense. But again, last week, the vote was to hold that item to look at those tree ordinances on the preliminary docket.
Okay, Josh, did you have anything?
No, I think Jennifer covered it great. I mean, we go back to the conversation about the comprehensive plan being about the vision. And we did have that conversation. And I think Commissioner Menzer is also talking about the vision for the future. So yeah, no, everything's
Okay.
good.
Let me just loop back around then. Ty?
Well, a tree related group came out of the climate summit a couple years ago, and I've had a chance to look. I mean, Tumwater has a tree policy group. There was a group there that put together a memo that kind of compared the ordinances across the different jurisdictions. Olympia, Tumwater, Lacey, and Thurston County all have a completely different approach. The counties is by far the most confusing from my perspective. So yeah, I voted to put the UGA piece on them, and that was a 2-to-1 vote, and it's a democratic process. I get it, but I just have to put my 2 cents in that. I think between I mean, the staff notes say regulations outdated. I mean, that's an understatement. So I think this is a high priority item in light of the climate issues that we're facing and the joint planning that we're trying to get updated with our jurisdictions, which helps with residential development. So anyway, I put my 2 cents in that this should be a high priority item, looking kind of broadly scoped, and yeah, connected to the urban tree ordinance if you're willing to rethink that. But in any case, that's my 2 cents.
So you're advocating add it.
Yes,
to the docket.
please.
Gary?
Well,
Go ahead, Gary.
I'm gonna advocate for leave it on the preliminary docket rather than remove it. And I'm not willing to assign work to it to add it at this point in time, for the previous reasons that I mentioned.
So I'm going to go back to Jennifer, since I pointed out that nuance of the staff capacity has been an issue, and it did indicate that it was low. But after hearing what Commissioner Menzer said, which makes the scope quite a bit more comprehensive, what would staff's recommendation be, not only to add or maintain it, but if it were added, what does that do to all the other ones when it comes to resources? I mean, the obvious answer is it's going to stretch.
I think as described by Commissioner Menzer, and I agree with his assessment of the outdated nature of the tree ordinances in general. A25 was more narrowly about the forestland conversion ordinances, but they are connected. And I believe we talked about it being a 0.25, so about a quarter FTE over the 2-year docket cycle to do the urban forest ordinance. So I could see folded together this one and that one. If we just look at the ordinances themselves and don't have to look at the plans and the policies, it would be about a 0.25 FTE over 2 years, I think, to probably make the necessary changes.
Maple Lane was 0.2 and we got rid of that. So see, there you go.
Okay.
We just saved some staff time for trees.
Do we have Gary that wants
Trees,
to meet?
Trees,
ahead,
not prisons.
Yeah. Never mind. We have Gary that says maintain it, Ty that says add it, and I vote to add it.
Okay, so item 825, Commissioner Hutchins and Commissioner Menzer voted to add it, and Commissioner Edwards to keep it, so it gets added.
Well, I'll vote to add it. I mean, I don't care. I mean, it's not an issue. I don't wanna make the folks feel like they're working on something I don't like. I'm really concerned about this from a standpoint, I had a house that had a tree I asked the county if I could remove, and they said no. And that tree eventually, when a windstorm came right through the middle of the house, ruined it. So I would have liked to seen some clarification there for sure. I just don't know how much work is gonna go into this and add it in conjunction Because now we're moving out from the UGA to rural America, I think now, is that right? Would you say, Ty, would that be a true statement?
Yeah, I mean, it's not, I mean, I agree with, you made a comment, I think earlier about one size fits all doesn't work. And I agree with that. I'm not saying that
Yeah.
we come up with a one size fits all solution. It's got to be nuanced, but I'm just asking for it to be updated and relooked at.
Okay.
Yeah, my intent
I'll
of
leave it.
my intent of recording the vote was not for you to change your vote.
No, I'm just saying, I support looking at it, I just didn't know how much time we were
Okay,
gonna-
so to clarify,
So,
item 825 is 3-0 to add it.
yes.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, because I was going to vote to maintain it, but after hearing Commissioner Menzer, yeah, I'm all for it, and hearing Jennifer's analysis as well. So thank you.
So the name of it will probably be changed a little bit on the official docket so that it can incorporate a look at basically Forestlands conversion and tree protection ordinances, if that makes sense.
Thank you.
Yes? Okay. All right.
So
On to-
item A26 is the emergency housing ordinance. The board declared a public health emergency back in June of 2018, a homelessness crisis, and this ordinance stemmed out of that. So if you'll recall, last year the board adopted an emergency interim ordinance that needs to be renewed by June 25th and then every 6 months after that. And this docket item would allow community planning to continue to work with public health and social services and the sheriff's department to determine what the permanent ordinance would look like. So this allows for a waiver of requirements for homeless encampments. It does not create a camp, and it is not about buying property near the cities. It's primarily to address a waiver in a crisis, a declared crisis.
So Maya, just real quick, the board has voted on this in the past. And has anybody in the community used the ordinance that it creates?
I don't know off the top of my head. I see Jennifer shaking her head no.
Brett, you want to chime in?
I do not know of a situation where this ordinance has been used in the past.
Hey Brett, your microphone is low.
So Maya, repeat what you said though, that it about requirements.
Right. So this ordinance, the interim ordinance, provides a waiver of requirements for homeless encampments. An example of that would be where it can be sited, what the minimum size is. It doesn't provide a waiver of all requirements, and it's not about creating a camp or buying property.
Okay. If anybody has a hand up, hang on, because I'm writing. All right, Commissioner Menzer?
This is just, I mean, we had that long process last year. That was about an interim ordinance, and this would be to make it, kind of permanent, what those rules might be.
Right. So this allows the county to continue to pursue permanent regulations in lieu of the interim.
So a lot of work hopefully is done because we worked so hard on it last year, or you guys worked so hard on it last year.
And it's a bit of a joint effort between community planning and public health and social services. So.
Okay, thank you. I'm in favor of.
And it's under our the emergency ordinance as well, because it's emergency.
Right.
Commissioner Edwards?
Okay, I guess I want to clarify, if we move forward on this, is that going to make it, does it have anything to do with auxiliary dwelling units? And does it make it easier to create a homeless camp in the unincorporated county?
It is not related to accessory dwelling units.
Okay,
so
good.
Those two items are unrelated.
Okay.
As far as allowing for a camp in a rural area, it would allow a bit more flexibility for waiver of specific requirements in a public health emergency.
Okay, I am opposed to the, moving of a homeless camp into unincorporated Thurston County. And I wanna make sure that I get the vote right that complies with that philosophy, if you will. I think that those camps need to be maintained in municipal areas where service is more available. I don't think we've ever gotten to where we offer adequate service, whether it's mental health or drug treatment. And I don't want those camps created in the unincorporated part of the county. So that's just where I'm at on it. And if this is gonna make it easier to create those camps in unincorporated Thurston County, then I'm gonna be opposed to that. So I know it's a democratic process, maybe my seatmates want camps in unincorporated Thurston County, but that's up to them. I'll accept the democratic process as mentioned earlier by Ty.
So, Josh?
Just a quick clarification from staff. This comes back to the board every 6 months, right, as an interim ordinance essentially?
That's correct, yes.
And when's the next time the interim will come back to the board for their approval, up or down?
Fairly soon, so
I
the
believe
interim,
it's June 2020.
yes, the interim ordinance needs to be renewed by June 25th, 2020.
And so it's either renew it or not every 6 months, or take this action. Is that right?
This action also they're two separate actions. So this docket item would allow the county to pursue permanent regulations in lieu of an interim ordinance. The interim ordinance will come back every 6 months. The county has the option to renew it or let it go. So.
And just go ahead, Josh, do you have more?
No, that's okay.
So Josh, think about, similar to the marijuana regulation.
Yeah.
You know, it was keep extending until the board took an action to make it a permanent. So it's the same scenario right here, is we have an emergency ordinances, and I think the ordinance right now gives you the authority to waive some requirements. And that is, it lapses, the first step was for a year. In June, the board will have an option to extend that for another 6 months, but it's not a limit on the extension of 6 months, I believe.
Right. And so it's not this saying yes to working on the permanent ordinance isn't allowing encampments in rural areas.
Just waiving some requirements.
Right, okay.
So I'm sorry, did I cut you off? Okay, so I'm not in favor of permanent camps anywhere. I'm not in favor of homeless encampments in deep rural America or rural Thurston County. But I see the need sometimes where it could arise, where it's right within, it's not within the city limits, but it's adjacent. And it could be an emergent or emergency type nuance because we're in a state of emergency with the homelessness. I'm not in favor of a permanent relaxation of all the permitting of the requirements for encampments. But I am in favor of extending this for 6 months and keep it as an extension or an interim basis, because we may come out of this, but we may have to do something different. So I don't want to make it permanent. I don't want it to go away. I'd like to keep it on an interim basis and keep it just fluid for us, so we have room to maneuver.
So what we have on this item, Commissioner Menzer would like to add it to the docket. What I understand, Commissioner Edwards doesn't want to remove it.
I'm opposed to adding it to the docket.
So remove it or keep it on the preliminary docket?
I would remove this.
Okay, remove it, and I believe Commissioner Hutchins, you would like to put it on the preliminary?
I have it marked down to add, but I didn't understand that nuance of, I don't want it to become permanent. I want to continue the interim process. Now, if that means maintaining it for 21, 22, that's fine. If it's add to 20 to 21 official docket, keep it here, that's fine. I want it not permanent. I want it interim basis. And it will come back every 6 months.
So we have a three-way vote.
Go ahead, Jennifer.
Well, I was going to say that I think what Commissioner Hutchings is seeking would be achieved if we added it, if we talked about the title of 826 as interim emergency housing ordinance, and we put it on the 2020-21 docket. I think that would solve that that case where we're not committing to creating a permanent ordinance at this time, but we're maintaining the interim ordinance and the every 6 month renewal process.
Yeah, like we did with the marijuana, with grows, the moratorium and such. And we're working with PHSS on this, and I am not in favor of, I want people to understand, by adding it to the docket to keep it on an interim basis, that gives us the flexibility as a commission to maneuver, that this does not mandate or require, or doesn't even hint that we're putting any encampment away from all the services, as my seatmate suggested, out in deep into the county. I'm not in favor of that either.
I just want to clarify, my vote is not because I want to put a homeless camp in rural county. As we talked about last year, this is creating a toolbox that would give us the flexibility to do something if and when we wanted to. And yeah, I would like that toolbox to be permanent, but that doesn't mean at any point necessarily, if the circumstances didn't warrant it, that I just don't want folks to interpret my vote as a vote to establish a mitigation site or anything else anywhere. It's just creating the flexibility to do that if circumstances would warrant it. So that's just clarification of what my vote is.
Okay, so what I'm hearing though is you would add it still.
I'd still add it to make the toolbox permanent, and then we can use it in appropriate circumstances if and when we need it.
So how do we do that? Because I want to add it if it keeps it interim. Because I'm not letting what I can't do get in the way of what I can do.
So Commissioner Hutchins, the options is to add it to the docket, keep it on the preliminary docket, or remove it.
I do have an additional comment.
Go ahead, then I'm going to go back to Jennifer.
Okay. My argument for not having it is because I cannot envision that we should try to bail out, and I'm going to use Olympia as the example. I think this whole homeless thing has been handled terribly, and the reason I say that, Olympia has encouraged people to come from all over the United States. The vast majority of the homeless problem that we're suffering right now is because they've been encouraged to come here because they're allowed to live a deviant lifestyle with no expectations that they be accountable. I think it's completely wrong. We will never have the resources to deal with that philosophy. And that philosophy will never get fixed if we don't do something about drug treatment and mental health treatment. And we cannot handle the whole country's, it ends up in just like Seattle or San Francisco. So if we create an ordinance ability that we can have homeless camps in unincorporated Thurston County, I think it just promotes that mishandling of the whole homeless problem. And I just can't see that that's a good scenario for the citizens in the county to try and bail out the city of Olympia.
All right, you've made your point. Thank you, sir. And with that, in fact, the Olympian, as a part of the point in time count or mounted are kind of contradictory what you just suggested. So fact or fiction, I don't know. But I'm not looking to do that either in rural county. But Jennifer, how do if I'm going to add it, I do want to be assured that it's an emergency interim policy. I don't want anything permanent. How do I get there? If it's a three-way vote, it's a three-way vote.
I think one pathway to get there would be to docket it as the interim emergency housing ordinance. And we will continue to bring it back to you every 6 months through the emergency, but we would not be committing staff resources to create it as permanent code.
Jennifer, sorry to interrupt. Does that get to the commissioner changing the title? Does that address Commissioner Mintzer's request to make the toolbox permanent?
It doesn't address my request, but
No.
My question, and that's fine. I don't mind if I get outvoted here, but my question, I want to be clear that if we remove it, if we went with Commissioner Edwards and we removed it, wouldn't we still have the interim process that coming back to us?
That is correct.
This docket item is about creating a permanent toolbox. We could say we're not creating a permanent toolbox. We still passed our interim ordinance and we could still revisit that. So why would we have to
Yes.
change the name to keep that alive is what my question for Jennifer.
No, you're right.
But then my suggestion will be is to keep it on the preliminary docket. And we continue to bring the emergency ordinance for the board's consideration here in June.
But that's not what I just heard. If we remove it, we were still operating under the interim ordinance that comes back every 6 months.
Right, but keeping it on the preliminary docket give you the option to revisit this item to make it a permanent next year.
And so Commissioner Hutchings, if you keep it on the, whether you remove it or keep this item on the preliminary, the interim will still come back every 6 months.
Mhm.
So you could vote to remove it, Hutch, and you'd still get what you're looking for.
Okay,
Just a revisiting of the interim ordinance.
okay. So that's what I'm going to continue working with public health, continue working with the RHC, give us flexibility, but I don't want to make it permanent, nor invest 50% of a full-time employee working on it.
Travis has his hand up. But
Travis,
he's muted.
you're in the shadows.
That's deliberate, Commissioner. I wanted to interject that just, I think that process works without having on the docket. However, at the time that you would extend it, there still would need to be a finding of an emergency, which is very possible. But I just want to, just like the marijuana temporary interim measures, after a number of years, if you let this go, let's say 10 years, that becomes questionable. So although I agree that there may still be elements of an emergency present in June when you reconsider, that I just want you to all understand that in order to make an emergency action, you still need an emergency. Otherwise, you need it on the docket. But I just wanted to add that detail just so that folks aren't confused.
No, thank you for that nuance, but I would only add, I'll get back to Josh, but the only thing I would add is, I don't think it's going to be a non-emergency in 6 months or a year, but especially in light of the pandemic, I think it's going to be exacerbated. Go ahead, Josh.
Well, that was kind of my point, was I want to make sure that we're clear on which emergency we were talking about. When this initiated, the COVID-19 wasn't the emergency that initiated this process. It was the homeless crisis.
Right.
And so to Travis's point, if in the future sometime we don't have a homeless crisis, then yeah, I think we could take it off.
Okay. So I'm in favor of removing it then and continue on with the interim process.
So what I'm hearing is then Commissioner Menser would like to add it to the docket and Commissioner Edwards and Hutchins to remove it, so it gets removed.
And that doesn't mean it can't be put on in another year. Okay.
And just for clarity's sake, just so we're all on the same page, this item does its action, but you still will see the interim emergency housing ordinance come back to you on June 25th.
Yes.
Sooner than that.
Sooner than that.
Yes.
Thank you.
That's the deadline.
Good point.
Okay, do we have time for one more before your planned lunch break?
Yes.
The next one is
Yeah.
A27. Okay, great. So A27 is the reasonable use exception. I alluded to this earlier at the top of the 10 o'clock hour where I talked about the fact that this is sort of staff's effort to target in on a problem that citizens have brought to us and that we've seen an opportunity to amend our process for reasonable use exceptions to potentially save some money and time for applicants on some types of projects while still retaining environmental review and requiring scientific evidence that a development project maintains natural resource functions and values. If you recall, a reasonable use exception is a type of approval that you need if the critical areas on your property prevents you from pursuing your development. And so you need to get this exception. And currently, all of these RUEs, as they're known, go to the hearings examiner for approval. We don't have an administrative path. But we do have skilled folks on staff who, for certain types of projects, can make those decisions administratively. So not with no need to go through the time and cost to go to the hearings examiner, but still requiring the critical area reports and reviewing those and making sure that we're maintaining critical areas, functions, and values. So we've had both Brett, the Building and Development Services Manager, and our Natural Resources Services Team Lead, Brad Murphy, have been working and looking at this, and they both they agree that in-house staff have the expertise to review and make administrative decisions for some types of RUEs. And so the process of implementing this code change would be to nail down the types of projects that would be appropriate for an administrative path, and then bring those proposals through to our normal Planning Commission public hearing, and then up to you process.
So
Okay.
I have a quick
Yeah.
addition too. Brett, I know it's difficult to give numbers, but ballpark conservatively, while still maintaining environmental protections, how much time and money could this save citizen applicants potentially?
The time that it could save citizens could be up to 3 months of savings, and the costs savings to citizens is approximately $4,000.
So once we get nailed down which projects go into this, it could help citizens save time and money.
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay, so
That's
302
unanimous.
audit. Item 827, 302 audit.
Yeah.
And,
Right.
Commissioner
Perfect.
Lunch is here.
Thank you. So we're going to take a recess now until we come back. We're about 10 minutes. Is this a working lunch?
Yes, sir.
Okay, we'll take a good 10 minutes, 12 minutes. We'll be back. So we're back about 12:10. That's 15 minutes. See ya.
3, 2, 1.
And welcome back. It's still April 23rd. It is, isn't it? Yeah. And we're continuing on with the preliminary docket list. We got a lot accomplished already, various remote locations. So Jennifer, let's continue on with where we are, which is it J?
JP2, JP3, and JP4. I'm going to talk about them together because they're all very similar. These are our joint planning items with the cities of Olympia, Lacey, and Tumwater. So as you know, we maintain zoning codes for the Olympia, Lacey, and Tumwater urban growth areas. And over time, we have a joint planning agreement in place, the county does with each of these cities. And over time, we are to try to keep pace and maintain our urban growth area zoning codes consistent as possible with the city's zoning codes. And that's to facilitate an orderly annexation process, so that when somebody lives in the UGA, is annexed to the city, it's not like they're going from one set of development regulations to something completely and utterly different. We try as best we can to operate in a coordinated fashion with the cities. That's not to say there are nuances and tweaks in different ways we do things for unincorporated UGAs compared with the cities, and there are certainly issues that the cities deal with in their codes that aren't priorities for us to deal with in the UGA codes. But we are supposed to be sort of aligned as much as we can and working in coordination. Because of staff resources over many years, we haven't really been keeping pace. We've fallen sort of behind on some of these UGA zoning code updates. So what JP2, JP3, and JP4 are all about is bringing us back into alignment on the highest priority code updates. And to identify those, I can't tell you what those are today. We are working with the Thurston Regional Planning Council, who is facilitating the conversations between the county and the other jurisdictions, so that we know what the priority code updates are that we need to focus on for this coming couple year period. So this will take some time. We're going to update our joint plans first, which you already put on the development or on the comprehensive plan docket, and then the codes will come after. So that's where we are. And I guess I would suggest the same vote for all three.
I'm on board with all three of those. Commissioner Edwards?
I do have a concern with all three of them.
Okay,
And
go
that
ahead.
is, oftentimes, we do things in the UGA area to benefit a future annexation for the municipality that's going to make that annexation. So we do a lot of capital outlay, if you will, to bring streets, sidewalks, center dividers, whatever it is, to a municipal code at our taxpayers' expense, and then it gets turned over to that particular municipality that wants to, that has that requirement in their code. I'm not opposed to any of the additions that may be proposed, but I'm gonna use what I normally use when I'm talking to the public oftentimes. The city of Lacey has 38 public parks employees. We have 4 public parks employees. Bigger area by far. The reason for that disparity is the Growth Management Act never did come out with phase 2 and give the counties adequate resources to conduct business. So what we're doing here is we seem to be taking very limited county resources and doing municipal work and then turning it over to that municipality. And I have nothing against trying to keep the codes right, but I'm very concerned that we're spending the taxpayers' money from the county and our very limited resources to do city work. So that's my concern with all of them, and I entertain, maybe I'm missing the boat here. I don't know. I know sometimes we make recovery on certain road projects and stuff, but the time involved by staff to be dedicated to tracking all this down, I would much rather have the individual municipality pursue and prepare the work to be done and then let us move forward. So let them do the work prior to the annexation rather than using Thurston County taxpayer money to do the work and then do the annexation.
All right.
So,
Romero, do you want to explain how this is, or Jennifer, how our legislative process, we just had that annexation deal pass.
I can probably explain about the legislation, they passed related to annexations. But I think Jennifer will be better suited to explain the nuances between these items on the development code docket in alignment with the code that different cities have. So I, at least from my perspective, is a little bit different, but I can probably speak of the recent legislation which allows what I call, I'm gonna use orderly annexation process that this legislation requires to have an interlocal agreement among the counties and jurisdictions affected by the proposed annexations to come up with a model as to how the annexation should occur, including assessing the financial impacts from both jurisdictions. That is in terms of the new legislation they just passed this past session.
So, which could address Commissioner Edwards' concerns about giving away the farm, so to speak.
And you know, I had kept the board informed about this piece of legislation that we have been working for the last 2 years, really, as to how finally we got to the point of governor signing and make it coming into law. So it really gives us another tool, really, to make sure that when the board considers an annexation, we take the time to go through the process of an interlocal agreement and determining the impacts it will have to the county. And also, this piece of legislation addresses the islands. And that is so important, I believe, because it doesn't allow the creation of islands, but the sheer nature of an annexation.
Jennifer, did you have anything to add then?
Yeah, I'm going to set aside the annexation question and the public works and parks issues. And I want to give some comfort, though, with the zoning code and the work it takes to update those codes. The lion's share of the work to create the code language that then we would run through our planning commission and bring to you, that work is primarily done by city staff. So although there is work on our end anytime we update the city UGA zoning codes, and I don't want to negate that work, the city staff really plays a very strong role in providing us with the draft code language based on the priorities we identify working through with the TRPC. So I just want to make that clear.
And so can I jump in real quick here?
Please.
I think that's an important topic that Jennifer raises in terms of the workload. And also in terms of the kind of the character of those different UGAs, the conversation that the team has already started that's being facilitated by TRPC is just exactly to address some of those concerns about how we build the UGA and then it gets annexed. So it is all kind of separate but connected. And the vote on this item is to essentially continue those conversations that are already happening, continue that good work by Jennifer and Brett, facilitated by Mark Daly at the TRPC and with the jurisdictions. So all of those things are on the table. We understand the direction from the board to update our codes, but also ensure that we keep our rural character where we can. So we're having those conversations. This vote is to keep that conversation going.
Okay. Commissioner Menser?
Just to throw in my 2 cents, when I was campaigning for commissioner, I met with business leaders and elected leaders in Lacey in particular. And the number one frustration they expressed with the county was this issue and how kind of what Jennifer laid out about how we were really behind on getting these updated. So, and that was having a direct and substantial impact on economic development in the county, specifically in the urban growth area of Lacey, which is our, by far the biggest growing area, fastest growing area and largest urban growth area. So, so I committed to working to try to get these things updated so that things are working more smoothly. And so I intend to support, and I agree that they should all be done in tandem. So I'm supporting these 3 items.
All right. And I'm supporting these 3 items too for all the analysis that the staff has put together as well. And I'm comfortable doing that. Any final thoughts from anybody?
Commissioner Waskenater.
Gary?
Yes, it's not that I don't support the items. I do support the items. But in the past, we've had applicants contribute to the workload that's created at the county side of things. So I just want to make sure, because any of the economic development activity that takes place and then in turn gets annexed into that municipal jurisdiction, going back to phase 2 of growth management that was never enacted. When growth management was enacted, it was always supposed to have a phase 2 portion, so that counties would have the ability to provide adequate services. We never did get that. The legislature dropped the ball on that issue. So I do support the process, but I want to make sure that as we move forward, we allow for them to do whatever work it entails to get that through the process. That's all. I don't want that burden shouldered by the county taxpayers that live out in rural America, and they're paying the way for the municipality. So how we can make that happen, or if we can have Jennifer make a note to that effect, that we do allow, I'll use Lakeside as an example. When they were allowed on the docket, then they also had to come up with resources to move that process forward. I'm just advocating that we, out of fairness to the county taxpayers, we try to do the same thing so that we're not shouldering that workload that could be shouldered by that future annexation municipality.
So I don't want to get sidetracked, but did Lakeside, did they have to come up with resources, or did they offer them?
Yeah, I believe to move the thing
that's
forward, that's been 10 years. It's languishing for about 10 years now.
But hang on, Gary.
And I do think
Is that something
we
the
gave
county
them that option.
mandated they come up with someone, or did they offer to help the process along?
I don't know the answer to that.
I know I'm asking Josh or Jennifer.
That's an option to every citizen initiative initiated item.
No, I get that, but it was inferred though that they had to do it.
I
No.
don't think so.
No.
No.
Well, they don't
Right.
have to do it, but their project can lay in language like Dr. Barnett's project
got
down in Tenino. For 4 years, that man's been waiting. He
Commissioner,
got
you made your
nothing out
point.
of it.
Are you giving a
Nothing.
thumbs up or down to this, or sideways?
Well, I just want to make sure that we put in there that we don't expend county tax dollars doing the municipal work. That's what my concern is.
Okay. Can that be addressed?
I think as I said, we will be working really closely with city staff to ensure that they are kind of carrying the load of doing all of the code amendment work and then bringing it to us to take through our process, which really eliminates a big load for us. So that's
I guess, again, following up, my concern is that individuals like Dr. Barnett are not left hanging because we dedicate resources to the city's situation and we leave the citizen out there hanging for, in this case, 4 years. So that's where I'm at.
So I'm voting to keep it, to add it. those three.
Okay,
How about you?
I am, yes, I'm.
So, to record the vote, JP, items JP2, JP3, and JP4, 3-0 to audit.
Mhm.
Okay, great, thank you.
Thank you.
So we're moving on to, we have a few citizen-initiated code amendment requests. Again, the citizens can come to us just like anyone with ideas for how they would like the code to be updated, and we accept their information and put them on the preliminary docket and bring them to you, like today, to decide whether you want to put them on the official docket and move forward. And we do not collect fees for these items. So for CR1, and CR stands for Citizen Request. This is the Cascade Resort proposal. It's been on our preliminary docket for some time. We initially received application from them in 2011. We've kept touch with the applicant through the years, and a revised application was submitted recently in 2019, I believe. And we've been speaking to them to clarify what they're seeking, and staff feels like we have a clear path forward. This item has never been added to the official docket before, and the applicant's hopeful this time around. And it's basically to amend the building size limits that we have in place in the rural area for resorts and retreat facilities to allow larger resorts and retreats to be sited in our rural area through our special use permit process.
All right. And I've done my homework on this stuff, and I'm ready to add that one. Ty? Commissioner Edwards? Gary?
Yeah, yes, I want to add that, but I would like to say that this has been about 9 years now that they've been waiting to get something done. I talked to these people last week, and they were never made aware that they could have contributed towards the solution of this problem. So they're willing to contribute whatever that's going to take to make this happen, because it's really held them back all these years. And so I would like to make sure that we allow for that. I know that's a future discussion coming up, that we're going to be talking about how we do this.
Well, let's make the decision then so we can move forward.
I'm good. Let's move forward with it. I want to add it.
Oh, good. Okay.
So item CR1, 3-0 to audit.
Item CR2 is to review private pet kennel standards and waste management plans. This docket item comes from two places. A portion of this is a citizen-initiated amendment. The citizen wants more regulation on the number of breeding dogs that a property owner can have on a site. And the second portion of this amendment is to address waste management plans. Currently, those are reviewed by the hearing examiner, and there is some discussion on what is the best way to review those plans. This item came forward in 2004, and it has never been put on the official docket.
And Maya, is there a clear or difficult path forward on this one?
This item has a difficult path forward. Managing private ownership of breeding dogs could be difficult.
Managing or enforcing?
Correct.
Okay. Commissioner Menser, any thoughts?
So it's hard for me to understand this one exactly, where it's coming from. What I thought I understood was that I thought that this was about relaxing rules a little bit, in the sense that 3 to 10 dogs were treated as a kennel, whereas somebody might have those dogs and have to go through a kennel process, and somebody might have 3 to 10 dogs and not be a kennel, and this would allow them to do that and not have to make them go through the more onerous process of getting permitted as a kennel when they really aren't a kennel. So that was what I thought I got out of the materials, and that didn't seem unreasonable to me, that somebody might have, multiple dogs and not be running a kennel per se. So I was willing to let this get worked up unless there's a good reason to think it's it doesn't, you know, I mean, it's obviously stayed on the preliminary docket for a while, so it seemed like that was more of a staffing issue than it was a terrible idea, let's remove it because it doesn't make sense issue. But correct me if I'm wrong.
I'll get to you, Gary, in a second. I had the same concern. I thought it was letting people to have 3 or 4 dogs do that without having to being considered a kennel. And I know there's a nexus somewhere with puppy mills and or our JASCOM committee, animal services, and what we provide or don't provide in the county. So I understand and I agree that it would be difficult to go forward with enforcing or making this thing managing it. Now, if it was one thing for a pet owner, but I was thinking 3 or 4, but now this goes up to 10. But if they house more than 11, then they go to the hearings examiner for an RUE, for special use permit rather. And I'm thinking that just seems very weird. Commissioner Menser, you had your hand up. I'm not sorry, Menser, Gary Edwards. Gary?
Yes, my concern is how does this, and I guess this is for staff, how does this address the barking dog problem that we seem to get a fair amount of complaints about? How does it fit?
I think you're speaking to the difficult path forward assessment that we've provided. I want to provide some clarity around the citizen part of where this is coming from. We do have a citizen who's been actively contacting us and wanting this to be addressed. And the citizen issue is really about complaints about a neighbor's keeping of dogs on their property. And that citizen does not want to see commercial kennels allowed in residential areas, but feels hobby kennels might be okay as long as we restrict to 3 unspayed females. And it does have to do with nuisance issues, for everything from the treatment of dogs to the sound of dogs to the management of the waste. And so that's kind of the citizen angle. I think it's a difficult path forward because, again, as I said before, enforcement is, challenging for us. And on something like this, where it's a neighbor to neighbor, it's even more challenging at times. So just wanting to raise that flag, I guess.
Thank you. You said a hobby kennel, and then you said female dogs?
Yeah, the citizen suggested that we restrict the keeping of dogs in a hobby kennel to no more than 3 unspayed females.
Okay. Back to you, Ty. Anything?
I just feel like this is an example of one where we should just put it on or take it off. Like, this has been on since 2004. This is one where we're kind of stringing the citizen or the issue along. Like, we need to make a decision and just say we're moving on it or we're not. I don't see a reason to keep it on the preliminary docket. That said, I'm not sure which way it ought to go. So I'm just listening to what you guys have to say. I mean, I think I could go almost either way because I just don't know. There's a lot of confusing elements to this, and which, like, it sounds like Jennifer's describing the citizen is a citizen's worried about somebody else's operation, not their ability to do something for themselves. So it's almost like a neighbor complaint issue, and 6 dogs or 7 dogs. I'm not sure. This one confuses me.
Well, and I'm with you that it sounds like a neighbor issue. We've only had one CR regarding it. I don't think we've received any comment. No comment received. And to alleviate their issue, which is probably a substantial issue when it comes to a quality of life for them, they want to invoke the county government to mediate and come up with a rule that we can't even enforce. So I'm not in favor of adding it. Like you said, it's either get on or get off. And I'm just not sold on it. Gary?
I guess the dissertation that Commissioner Menser explained here, the way he articulated it, I think that convinces me almost to, just keep it on the preliminary. It's been on there for 16 years now. Again, different philosophies of boards have had an opportunity to look at it, and they continue to keep it on the preliminary docket. And I'd like to know why, because on this particular issue, I have not had any public input myself, not been contacted one way or the other. And I hate to move it forward, because why would we do that? But on the other hand, I hate to remove it, because if we do remove it, we're then preventing for about 2 years a citizen from having any recourse if they did happen to be paying attention to us and see that all of us are rather not very knowledgeable, I guess, about the particular issue at hand here. And being it's been on for 16 years, maybe that person's even died by now that brought it to our attention. We don't know. It doesn't sound like.
No, this person has been, I've spoken with this person recently, multiple times.
So Jennifer, actually, maybe clarify where it says summary of written public comment, that says no comments received. Maybe we should.
We did not receive written public comment during our formal public comment period on the docket.
But we have received comments on this item.
I've had telephone calls, not in recent months, it was prior to even our formal docket period, but I've had telephone conversations with the citizen that's concerned with this issue.
So my concern then is, if it's an issue for this person and they want to invoke the county using an employee, I'm looking at the low 0.25 FTE or less, to address their issue, and their issue, I get this issue involves, or this legislation, this ordinance we would do by putting it on the docket, involves all dog owners and or kennels and citizens in the county. But I think even if we were to move forward and address this issue, once it's not enforced, we're gonna have that individual coming back saying, hey, you were supposed to fix it, you didn't fix it. And we're not gonna satisfy that individual, because we're not gonna go out there and check the undercarriage of the dogs to see if they're in compliance or not, if that's the way it went. So I'm still in favor of just removing it from the preliminary docket. It's one of my seatmates.
Can I put staff, I know you guys like to keep it straight, but it's any of you looking at Brett, Josh, Maya, and Jennifer, have a sense of whether you think our code standards around kennels are straightforward and reasonable, or are they really just kind of don't make sense to you just as a planner? Does anybody have an opinion they want to share?
Brett, I would say go for it, and with the eye of compliance in mind.
There is a clear path forward as it relates to kennels. It's 0 to 4, 4 to 10, and each one has their own process. As it relates to enforcement, we've had complaints where neighbors would call about a place or a facility having more dogs than what they were permitted for. When we go out there, we don't necessarily see all the dogs, and or we don't have the ability to chase dogs around the county to determine how many dogs, how many female dogs, how many male dogs, so on and so forth. And so if you think of that enforcement idea or ideology related to all dog kennels, it's a very difficult task to enforce.
So our code is straightforward, but the way that people act and how we can enforce it is difficult already as it currently stands. Doing this ordinance would just add more complication.
All right, so you're not feeling like that this is going to make things simpler and more straightforward. It could potentially make things worse.
Humans will continue to act as they do.
All right, I'll vote to remove it then.
Which tells me it won't satisfy the citizen. It won't be enforced. Go ahead, Gary.
I guess just as a follow-up piece of information, when you say no comments received, does that mean over that 16-year period, we've never had any comments, or just during the last 20-day comment period?
It's just that particular note on that piece of paper in front of you or in your binder is responding to the comment period we just held, the formal comment period for this round of docketing.
I mean, was there a big flurry of comments in a year past, in any one of those years past, that they didn't feel they got action and so they quit calling or what? I'm just trying to figure out why it's even there for 16 years and nothing's been done about it. That bugs me.
Right. So I can't speak to prior to 2016, but I did look at the last couple of docket cycles and there were no comments on this item.
Okay.
Okay,
Okay.
I say remove it.
Yeah. Same thing.
Okay, item CR2, 3-0 to remove it.
So CR3 is special uses composting. So this is another item that has been around for quite a long time. It's been on the preliminary docket since 2005 and it has never been officially docketed by the board. If this item were docketed, it would involve evaluating if a requirement that currently exists is necessary, and that's roofing over commercial composting. And if that could be removed from our current code, which could save time, cost, and effort for commercial compost applications. However, even if this item isn't docketed, there is currently a pathway forward for permitting. And we did reach out to environmental health based on their interest in continuing this item. They indicated that over the last 15 years since they originally were part in initiating this, they've only received 1 or 2 applications for commercial composting, so it's not extremely urgent.
So when you say there's a path forward, so times have changed and now there is a way to have a composting facility without a roof?
We do still require a roof. So this code amendment would be a clear path forward. We do allow for permitting. However, we require a roof for a commercial composting facility.
Can I comment on that?
Does that include when it says all the roof? Does that mean just over the composting itself or over all lands or driveway and whatnot?
I think this is specific to the commercial composting site. It's not relevant to driveways and accessories.
Not, okay, it doesn't say cover the entire operations, which would include trucks and everything else. And there is currently a need for roofing for, how does this apply to ag and farm?
So this is a bit of a separate item. This is for commercial composting, which is its own special use permit. Jennifer, did you want to chime in? You look like you had something to say? So it's separate from farming and forestry. It's for a commercial application for a composting facility, and that has its own special use permit requirements.
Okay. And so the issue is leave it alone and people can have are they granted a variance if need be?
I don't know the answer to that question off the top of my head.
Okay.
But as I mentioned in speaking with environmental health, we've only had 1 to 2 applications for this over the last 15 years. So this isn't something that we commonly get a lot of applications for.
Okay, we've had 1 public comment then on this issue in that time period, it looks like.
Maya, did you say there was a clear path forward on this?
Yes, so this would be a fairly straightforward code change. It does have a clear path forward. However, it's not necessarily a high priority item.
Thank you.
Initially, I'm in favor of removing this, but I'll wait my seatmates weigh in. Ty?
Maya, what does it mean I'm looking at a memo that was made, and I think you mentioned it just now. It says, however, there remains a pathway for permitting if this change is not made. What exactly does that mean?
Right. So an applicant could come in and apply for a commercial composting facility right now. However, there would be a requirement for a roof.
So you're just saying that when you say a pathway for permitting, you just mean that they'd have to put the roof on.
Correct.
Okay. And I seem to remember, it's not here right in front of me, but it's stuck in my head that I read somewhere that other jurisdictions allow for unroofed composting, that this change is a pretty reasonable request in the sense that it's not necessarily clear that we really have to have roofs over all composting.
So if this docket item were added, that would be part of the review. We'd look at what other jurisdictions do and if it really is an unnecessary requirement.
So this is just kind of a general concept. This is not a particular outfit that we're trying to assist. Nobody's got a burning fire here that they've got they're trying to expand, or they're trying to place a business in Thurston County and this is a problem. This is just sort of a general policy review that, okay.
It might be helpful to have the history in 2005 as to how it was first submitted, Maya.
Yeah, so my limited understanding in reviewing notes is that this item came through because there was a citizen who applied for a permit back in 2004, 2005. I believe that was Silver Springs. And they wanted to have a compost facility, but there was the requirement for the roof. So environmental health at that time applied for a code amendment, and the code amendment was to evaluate if that roof requirement is still necessary or if it could be removed, and it's been carried forward on the preliminary docket ever since then.
And that facility is now built and in operation with a roof, so
Yep.
it's kind of moved from their point.
It is a huge roof, and water is normally needed for composting, and so I think they water internally.
It is one of our vendors.
Gary, do you have anything to add? Go ahead, your hand was waving, Gary.
Yes, I guess,
Swirling flies.
I think you're on mute.
eventually,
Oh, there you are. Start again.
oh, okay, eventually, Silver Springs, when they did apply for this, they tried to do that recycle business with no roof. They went and got a special use permit, I believe, and were able to do it with no roof. Then they discovered that the climate in this area is not conducive to controlled amounts of moisture in their composting. And then they had to go ahead and build the roof, which they probably should have done in the first place instead of getting a variance, so I don't see any reason that we need to have this in here, I guess, is from my perspective.
And that's where I'm at, is just remove it.
Okay.
I'll go with you guys on that then.
Okay.
Okay,
Good.
item CR 330 to remove it.
Okay, the next item, CR4, is about allowing commercial smokehouses as a special use in the rural area. This comes from the applicant was Johnson Smokehouse, as you know, and we've had a lot of support in the public comment for this item.
Josh disappeared. Yeah, I'm all for this to be added.
Oh, I thought you saw your thumbs down, Commissioner, I'm sorry.
I did that for Josh, but then he left.
I'm still here.
Okay.
So I got
So no,
confused a little
absolutely,
bit.
I want to add this to the docket.
Got it. Thanks, Commissioner Hutchings. Sorry I missed it.
Okay. Did it, was all three of us?
Yeah, I mean, not only do I want to add it, I want to emphasize it and prioritize it. Because
I have a
there's about
question.
40 jobs out there that could be coming back online as soon as that thing's done.
Well, it's a great economic development with what he's doing, where he's going when he gets back up in business, because right before the fire, he was on board with several major outfits to include Costco for selling his wares. So this is a great economic development for the county and for that family as well. And I know that Josh and his team and Brett, you've been working your tails off on this as a special project, and I commend you for that. And Mr. Johnson had huge praise for all of the county and for your folks, what you're doing for him. So we just need to keep working with him, or have him continue working with us in the process to make it happen.
Commissioner Mentor, did you have something to say?
Yeah, so I was just curious about these citizen amendments, the tricky part about them is that they're usually geared toward fixing a specific problem for a specific citizen, but they're setting a policy across the entirety of the county, and that could be a good or bad thing to do. So, and I have no opinion about whether we need more smokehouses or bigger smokehouses across Thurston County, or whether we're going to get a wave of complaints because we allow this, or whether there would ever be another like smokehouse like Johnson. I don't know. I know that the community supports this business, and I'd like to see this item worked up. But my question is, all that comment that we got was I'm guessing that 99, if not 100% of it was about helping Johnson Smokehouse rather than the policy level. We need more smokehouses, or we should have bigger smokehouses anywhere in the county. Am I right about that? Or did somebody weigh in on the policy question?
I think most of them, I couldn't say all without going through them, but most of them clearly were supportive of this particular business. But part of putting on the docket is looking at the impacts of this code change all across the county and allowing everyone in the county to look at this from that perspective, not just as one business, but as what if this was built next door to me? And that will be part of the review that we do.
Yeah, good. 100% supportive. So that makes sense.
Good.
I'd like to go back up. Thank you for that, Commissioner Minster. I'll also go back to Commissioner Hutchings' statement. So Johnson Smokehouse is going on a couple of different paths, and appreciate the support for the staff working with Johnson Smokehouse on the permitting issues. This then is, like we've talked about, the code change overall, but they still, no matter who in the future has to get or wants a smokehouse, they still need to go through the special use permit process. So it's not a blanket, everybody gets a smokehouse. You still have to go through the permitting process. And Johnson Smokehouse is working through those processes now on the development code side with Brett and permitting. So just thank you for that support, but know that we're working to always follow the process in a consistent manner.
Good. You got that, Ramiro?
Yeah, so item CR4, 302 audit.
Yes. All right, CR5.
So item CR5 is Peace Lutheran to amend the district use standards for places of worship. So this request is to allow for a little bit more flexibility in the permitting process and allow accessory uses to be permitted with the conditional use permit. Currently, they are permitted separately, so they require 2 separate permits. This is not necessarily a clear path forward, and it would have a narrow impact. It's only impacting the Olympia urban growth area.
Okay, and the comments received, both in support, they're from the citizen, I would imagine?
From the applicant.
Applicant, okay. Gary, I'll start with you. Any
I'm
questions?
good with it.
Ty?
I'm not sure I understand it. This is one I had questions on, and can you explain what it's going from what to what? I'm still not tracking.
Right. So currently, if you have a church or facility, you have to apply for that, and then you have to apply for any accessory uses subject to the zone that it's in. So it's a separate permit process for the accessory uses. Like if you wanted to have housing on site or a Montessori school, it would be a separate permit process. The request is to combine those and make those separate uses folded in as an accessory use under the conditional use permit.
Only in the Olympia UGA.
Correct.
I could support this.
Did Olympia have any input?
They did not comment during the comment period. However, we would be reaching out to them as part of review if this were docketed.
Okay. So I already had it down there. I ticked the box to add it. So I wanted to hear.
Item CR5, 302 audit.
Yeah.
Yep. Jennifer, you're muted.
I was doing so well, and then the last one got me. So this is our last one, CR6. This comes to us from the Thurston PUD. And it is asking for the county to consider adding into our development regulations setbacks from utility corridors and easements. So staff sees this as a little bit of a difficult path forward. It's adding an additional setback requirement on private property that could impact, how folks can use their property outside of an existing easement that Thurston PUD maintains for a main water line, and it also would apply to PSE, who is supportive also of this amendment. You received a letter in September 2019 where the PUD was expressing concerns with. It started out with a specific site development activity that was happening immediately adjacent to the PUD's main line, as well as utility lines managed by PSE. So that specific process kind of started their concern. I think that was resolved, and I think that's because the project was withdrawn, but their concern remained for future projects as a public health and safety issue. And they've proposed and given us a proposal for specific code amendments to add 5-foot setbacks from utility corridors or right-of-way easements for commercial, industrial, and residential projects, and a 35-foot setback for buildings that would be housing animals located near those easements or corridors.
Hey, Brett, I have a question. Help me understand the easement process. Is that our process or someone else's?
The easement is created with the property owner and the utility separate from the county. All they have to do is record it. So if you had an 8-inch pipe and that pipe had 5 feet on either side of it, you would have a 10-foot easement with an 8-inch pipe in the middle. What the request is to go beyond the easement to a further setback that could be, as Jennifer stated, 5 feet further on either side, creating a buffer or a setback to the existing easement that was agreed upon by the property owner and the utility.
So could this be achieved in the same way by the property owner and the utility just making a bigger easement?
Yes, it could. Yeah.
Why would we do this setback if they can do the easement?
That's an excellent question. I necessarily don't have an answer for that other than they would have to coordinate with the private property owners. And in this case, if this was added, we would then have to apply in our zoning standards an additional setback to the property owner, whoever wanted to build and or expand on their property.
So the county would get to tell the property owner, you can't use your land.
Yes, sir.
Okay.
All right, Gary? Are you waving the white flag?
Yeah, well, I'm not giving up yet. I was waving the white flag to get your attention, but I'm not giving up. I have the same concern here that I had with UGA issue around the municipalities, and that is that the PUD is a separate taxing district. They have their own resources, and the public pays that bill, and we do not have the resources to do their work for them. So getting back to the question that Josh asked, why not let them get an easement when they need an easement? And again, at their expense, at their turmoil, they're gonna have to negotiate that easement. Why should we do that work for the Public Utilities District at the taxpayers' expense of Thurston County, separate taxing district, by the way? That's my concern.
And or taking additional property from an property owner.
Well, yeah, I just don't wanna be in the middle of doing somebody else's dirty work,
Right.
you know?
Ty?
I support this item as a lower priority item. I think it's reasonable that PUD gets, that people that they have access to their utility main lines, and there could be a health and safety component. And as long, I'm not saying what setback I would agree to or find reasonable. That's for staff to research and propose, but I'm willing to let them do that since the PUD's made this request and this has come up, and I'm willing to let this work get done and evaluate the result.
So I'm glad to hear what you had to say, Gary, because I was along the same lines about doing the work for them and creating a policy at the county level for this when they could potentially do it themselves. But I was looking at taking additional property under ordinance. I understand the sensitivity of the safety of water main lines and power utility lines, but is this coming to us as a request because it's like preemptive, or is this something there's been an issue and they need to protect some of the other lines? Romero?
Yeah, as Jennifer stated, I received a letter from the executive director of the PUD outlining in a specific example and then requesting a change of the code. That's what the item is before you today, with the specific requirements as to the additional setbacks that they would like to have on their facilities. I did have a follow-up conversation with the executive director related to this item, and along the same lines, Josh, is, they have the ability to protect their facilities if they see a need by securing additional easement setbacks from specific property owners. And also they do have the eminent domain action to secure those additional setbacks. What they would like to see is as a blanket policy, without having them to negotiate with individual property owners, with the county to provide the additional setbacks, which from my point of view, that creates a lot of encumbrances for those property owners who might be affected by this action.
So again, this wasn't as a result of some type of an emergency or somebody digging up a line. This is as a result, this is a preemptory or preventative, but they wanted that to us to do it.
I think that's accurate.
Okay. All right. I'm a thumbs down. I'm removing it. I mean, I'm in favor of removing it.
As am I.
Commissioner Messer, you stated you want to keep it?
I'm voting to add it.
Okay, so it's to Commissioner Edwards, Commissioner Hutchins to remove it, and Commissioner Messer to add it. So if it's removed.
Well, we did it.
No, where's the other notebook?
No, that's it.
6 minutes over.
6 minutes. So I just wanted to thank you and commend you for this hard work today. And it did take us 3 hours plus. So thank you for that. And the next step will be that I think we're going to schedule it for your next Tuesday morning meeting. We're going to get an AIS in today with the final versions of the official dockets for the comprehensive plan amendments and for the development code amendments as you've set them up. So you'll take one action to adopt those dockets, and there'll be one motion, but it'll be 2 separate dockets, and that's the way we do it. So
Okay.
Are there any questions on that process, or?
Just want to say for anybody watching that doesn't understand this, these, what we just did and what we did last week are advisory type votes, but we're doing the official one potentially at the next BOCC meeting on Tuesday during that legislative piece of it. And I want to commend all your staff for putting this whole thing together in such a way that it made sense, good analysis and good information. You were able to answer all the questions. So thank you. Romero?
Jennifer stated, hopefully we can get those 2 items for your final consideration on Tuesday morning during an agenda setting. But I just want to make sure that's the reason why I wanted to clearly record each of your votes on specific items. But the vote you may be considering taking next week is approving a docket entirely based on the overall voting schemes, not expecting for you to vote again on a specific item. It's going to be just on the overall docket, 2 different dockets. So that is why verbally I wanted to make sure that I record the vote. So we don't go through the process on Tuesday to go each item by each item again.
Good, okay. Mr. Menster, any final thoughts before I get to Commissioner Edwards?
No, good.
Gary, anything?
No,
Final?
sir. No.
All right, thank you very much, and this meeting is adjourned. Thank you.
Thank you all.
Bye. Thank you all very much.